In this conversation, we talk about the use of artificial intelligence in the professorate. So, how good are you at using artificial intelligence in the classroom, or have you even tried? It's a question that's on the minds of many educators these days. AI can feel like a double edged sword, offering incredible potential, yet frustrating to navigate and raising concerns about cheating. In this conversation, three professors from St. Leo University, Kenny Embry, that's me, Tonya Mazur, and Randall Woody Woodard, tackled the issues head on, sharing both triumphs and struggles, offering insights into how educators can harness AI's power while addressing ethical challenges. This is not a debate about whether AI is good or bad, but rather an exploration of how we can use it thoughtfully and responsibly to enhance education for ourselves and for our students. Some of the things that we talk about in this conversation include things like AI and cheating, prompt engineering, AI and critical thinking, the bias that is often found there, human skills versus artificial intelligence, AI in your personal life and not just professional life, and societal impacts of AI. This conversation doesn't shy away from the real problems associated with AI, confronting the potential for misuse, job displacement, and the erosion of human connection in a world increasingly dominated by screens. But ultimately, we talk about how to use this technology intentionally, how it can help us make our jobs easier. So let's get started. My name is Kenny Embry. I teach in communication here at St. Leo University. And we've also got Tonya Mazur. Tonya, introduce yourself.
My name is Tonya. I'm an assistant professor of management here at St. Leo University, and I am a bit of an advocate for AI.
And then we've got Woody, although your first name is Randall, but nobody calls you Randall from what I understand.
No, not since about sixth grade. So I'm Woody, and I teach theology here.
I want to start off here because I think one of the things that happens is all of us have a feeling about artificial intelligence. And I think a lot of people have a very negative connotation when it comes to talking about artificial intelligence. So let's go ahead and get the bat out first. Let's go ahead and address the 800-pound gorilla in the room. What's bad about this? What doesn't work?
The biggest fear that we have is that it's taking away the critical thinking of our students. But I think if we teach them how to use it to supplement their learning, then we can still integrate the critical thinking.
I tell you what, you can't stray very quickly before you're actually looking at the optimistic side of this again, aren't you?
I'm always the optimist.
There you go.
I think a couple of things come to mind right away. I know there was an overwhelming reaction immediately, very similar to when people started using the internet, that it was just going to be used for cheating.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to use, and I've done it myself. Like I've experimented a little bit with a class and shown this semester and last semester with my grad students, hey, here's what AI would respond if we used our prompt for this week's discussion and how well it does. So I did it a few times where I would put in our prompt, share that as a discussion post, just saying, I want you all to be aware of what this tool is, how it can be used. Here's how we don't want to use it for cheating. But I think the number one fear and the reaction against it is everyone's just, you don't need to write a paper anymore. You just put in the prompt, your stuff is done within 5 seconds. And then I think there's also a fear about job loss for a lot of different people.
Yes.
I know that was one thing that impressed me was when I was looking at the prompts and the answers that I would get from AI, it was extraordinary. So in the field of theology, I would ask it very pointed questions for our discussion. What it came up with was unbelievably good. And I realized how useless I was to humanity as soon as I did that. But there's different forms of expertise that may get pushed to the side because AI can replace researchers, some types of thinking. So it's not like an immediate concern. But I know that fear for job loss for any different types of experts, and then people in a variety of fields can be lost. Even people that do design, people that are creating, doing creative work. So those are the two big things that came to mind right away: is plagiarism, cheating, and then potential loss of jobs. But it's also very similar. Like I'm getting flashbacks to when people started using the internet. So fear can just be somebody's natural response to anything new, any new technology. But those are the two that come to mind.
Yeah, I remember when I was studying for my PhD down in Memphis, and one of the things that we talked about was Socrates, an old dead Greek guy, and one of the things that Socrates hated the idea of writing things down, because he felt like that writing things down meant you would not remember things, and heaven help you if you had a book, because that would give you the illusion that you had understanding and knowledge because you had the book, but that doesn't mean you understand anything in that book. And he was dead set against that. I see that argument, and one of the things that I have to concede is Socrates was right. We don't have very good memories. He was very prescient in what he actually forecasted for everybody else. I'm grateful things are written down. It means my brain does not have to retain them. But I understand as well that I have to go back to the book to find it now. Oh. And I think one of the things that happens to us here is there's real problems. You talk about cheating. And I think one of the things that this is a conversation that I have in my class all the time, Woody, and I suspect both of you have the same conversation. Students come to college often with different goals than we do. They want to get a grade, and we want them to get an education. And those are two different things.
Absolutely.
They just want to check the box and say, I have a degree. And I think sometimes it doesn't matter what that degree is in, and they just want to check the box. So, and that's why the fear of plagiarism, using AI negatively to do all of their work, they aren't here for the education. Some of them are, I think we're kind of overgeneralizing, but for the most part, there are certainly those students who just want to check that box.
Oh, and I think there are different goals too, like different goals towards education. So like getting a job is a completely reasonable goal for someone that's investing a lot of time and money in their college degree.
I agree.
But there's also different elements of education. Like even if you're going to be an accountant, I think there's incredible value to studying poetry and philosophy and science, because you're becoming a better rounded person. You're experiencing things, and you might learn skills for the rest of your life. Like things, I know my boys both graduated from a school that offered scuba diving as a minor. You can get certified. They didn't do it.
Cool.
But in my mind, I was like, how could you not do that, or guitar, or something where you get a skill that will bring you joy for the rest of your life?
Yes.
But that doesn't help you get a job necessarily.
No.
So I think there's different goals. And sometimes I've found, especially in my field, if somebody is not a major, they find it almost a problem that they're in the class. So they're looking for the easiest, simplest way out to do no work and to really not learn. And people just fail to understand being exposed to new ideas, new ways of thinking, different cultures, different histories, whatever it might be, is just push-ups for your mind, that even if you don't need to be strong that way, you are stronger, you're better, you've been exposed to different ideas. You'll understand humans more effectively. You'll understand different people's perspectives. So if you only look at education as a means to get the job that you want so you can make the money that you want, I think you just miss out on all sorts of other goals of education.
Right.
And that's one of the problems I see, is that people will use a tool like this to cheat because they don't care, and they're not seeing how much they're missing out on the richness of human life and experience, because they're only focused on one end of education rather than the broader kind of like liberal arts humanistic tradition.
Right. I remember when I was in my senior year at Western Kentucky University, I had to take an elective. And so one of the electives that I took was gourmet foods, because at the end of every class period, we had a meal, and I knew I would get at least one meal during the week. So that was a great class. I have not gone really very seriously into a kitchen again, but I think one of the things that you guys are talking about are some of the downsides of this. I think another big downside, there's not a good tool out there to ferret out cheating. You want to be able to say, it was this composed by artificial intelligence. How do you figure that out?
I kind of have some different goals that make AI less threatening in my class. Like I don't do a lot of memorization. I don't do a lot of objective. There's not a lot of multiple choice, true and false. Most of my teaching is geared towards like kind of deeper thinking. So most of my assessments are focused on, writing longer pieces. And I've shifted some of it from do a paper outside of class to write in class, handwritten. Let me see you responding. I can see that in discussions. So I don't have a lot of objective. And some of the things that I used to have students write on their own outside of class, type up and hand in. I've shifted to less formal pieces where I can assess somebody's thinking, handwritten. So it's very unlikely that they'd be using any tool to cheat.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I usually start with a baseline assignment as well, where they have to do in-class handwritten assignments. So I have a baseline of what they actually sound like.
Yeah.
And then, when they turn something in, you're like, that doesn't sound like what they wrote at all. And then you have that conversation. And I think transparency is key, and just saying, I did this as a baseline and this doesn't sound like you. Do you care to explain? And give them an opportunity to, justify what they did or tell the truth.
Yeah, I think what you're alluding to there is the best AI detector is probably your familiarity with the student. It's not an external tool that's going to flag something for you and say, this was probably written by ChatGPT. I know that there are several times when I will not assess a penalty, but I will pull a student aside and say, look, this does not sound like you. And you will not get very far if you don't understand what you're actually trying to write about, because I don't think you wrote it.
Right. And then another kind of tactic I use is we'll have them do the paper, and then in class, they need to talk about, even if it's not an actual presentation, it's just, take 2 minutes to explain to the class what you wrote about. And I've had students that can't explain it at all because they didn't do it.
You're right. They've learned how to game a system, haven't they? And the other thing is there are a lot of faculty members that teach only online, and one of the things that I worry about for people who teach only online, a lot of the strategies that I would say on ferreting out comes with dialogue. In other words, I understand what you wrote. Would you just tell me in your own words what you wrote? And that usually trips them up pretty quickly because they can't, because they didn't write it. I don't know. Do you have any ideas or strategies to ferret out the cheating that undoubtedly goes online?
I think with the online students, it's okay to pick up the phone and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Instead of going back and forth or trying to decipher something on the discussion boards, just call them and say, explain this to me. Elaborate a little bit more. What did you mean by XYZ?
It's difficult. I think there are ways to try and preemptively eliminate some of that. And then, of course, you can sort through and try to find things that seem obviously not. But I think I've accepted that even before we had the internet, somebody could have cheated. If people want to cheat and get nothing out of their education, they'll find a way no matter what. Yeah. So it's not resignation or just saying there's nothing we can do. But, somebody could have a spouse or a friend do their entire online degree, never even log in once, and get a piece of paper that essentially would be useless, but they've really cheated themselves. But I think part of it is there's always been, accepting that there's always been a way for people to be dishonest, unless you're just watching everything somebody does at all times, which it's just not possible.
I completely agree. I think I've got it on record now that you've given up. So, I mean,
variety of things. So I'll get a list for you.
I do want to move away because I think one of the things that I needed to do and we had to do was basically talk about the downside of artificial intelligence. Cheating is a big concern. And I think Woody basically said it really well, which is, just like locking your door at night, it's not going to keep somebody out of your house if they have a mind to get into your house at night. It's a deterrent. And we can offer a bunch of deterrents to students cheating, but I think one of the things you need to recognize is if you want to be the cheating police, you will spend your entire career trying to chase down the wrongdoers, and the students that are in your room will lose an education because you're just looking to prosecute. Does that make sense?
That'd be miserable. Yeah, and then you're just looking for it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess a big concession here is cheaters going to cheat. And there's not really, you're going to have to somewhat let go of that idea because like in every part of life, there are people who are going to take the shortcuts. For some of them, it will catch up with them. For some of them, it won't. And we'll be really frustrated at that. So I'm sorry if you're learning it right now for the first time, life isn't fair. But it sure isn't. But let's go to this part, which is I want to shift gears to what's the upside here? What are we gaining with artificial intelligence? Because, I mean, with every technology, with every innovation, with everything that we've ever gone through, there's been a real upside to this. I'm so grateful for running water because now I don't have to go down to the creek if I want to flush a commode. So, I mean, what's the upside to artificial intelligence?
Time saver. It is an absolute time saver. And that's something I tell my students too. It's okay to use it as a tool, just like the internet.
Yeah.
But don't have it do the work for you. But, how many times do we have students say, I don't know what to write about? So that's where you can use it. Okay, what are you passionate about and how does it relate to this class?
Yeah.
To narrow down a topic and then ask ChatGPT, what are some subtopics that I could discuss around this central topic?
Yeah.
And it just spits it out for you. And it's such a time saver. And then the students are like, oh, yeah, I can write about that.
I found a few things. One of the workshops that I went through got us to kind of think about some of the mundane tasks that we do that we would love to have an assistant or someone replace.
Yeah.
So probably my first exposures to using it myself were lesson planning, creating handouts, and then now updating and making presentations better. So like PowerPoints, just switching over to the designer and having it say, and those are simple things that just make a PowerPoint slightly more attractive or more engaging. But the handouts have been incredible that I've been able to use. So I'll take handouts that I've given, have it redesign them to make them more attractive. I'm not creative and I don't spend a whole lot of time on creativity.
I understand.
So my norm is here's a handout that gives you the information. Now I've found AI can create probably better handouts than I do. And when I've looked over them, I've been blown away at how good things are, especially when you learn to prompt more effectively. But the lesson planning as well, I've used to say, I've got a 50-minute class. I want to achieve these 3 goals. What are some activities that I can use? And again, the creativity boost and creating a handout for something new could take an hour. This is seconds.
Right. And I'm very big on scenario-based learning. And, before AI, I would sit down and say, okay, what kind of real world scenario can I come up with today? You always want to make it something kind of applicable in the news. And now I can say, Gen AI, create a scenario for me. These are my parameters. And now I've got a real world scenario they can actually learn from.
There are 2 things that I want to unpack because you both kind of addressed this through a back door. The first one that I want to talk about is prompt writing. And the second one that I want to talk about are the tools that are available. Because I think one of the things that we have some familiarity with some of the tools, but maybe there's a good discussion in what tools people ought to be using. But let's start here because I think the thing that most people aren't talking about is how important it is to ask the right question. We know this in the classroom. That if students ask stupid questions, they often get stupid answers. But when they learn how to ask smarter questions, they get better answers. So what is prompt writing and why is it a big deal?
So, fun fact, and I don't have the exact research that I read. I actually need to go back and find it. But research is showing that the number one skill that employers are looking for in recent graduates is prompt engineering. So we need to be able to teach our students how to engineer those prompts. What is it that they're trying to get out of it? What are they trying to ask? And you're right. It's just like going back into the classroom. Are you asking the right questions? So I think we're learning with our students on what it is they need to be asking specifically to get the answers that they're looking for from, say, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I think there's a history of this too, because I can remember being taught how to use the card catalog in a library to find things. If you looked up, not necessarily the wrong word, but the correct word, but not the most precise word or maybe a different word.
I understand.
And very similar to just using Google or other searches too. And I take students to the library every semester just to show them where the theology books are and how to do theological research. And I'm sure every other discipline has this, but if they're looking up word A and there's maybe a better term or a related term that they have to look up, you can do that with books. So like you've got an encyclopedia, just flip to the other word. or maybe another set of encyclopedias, but it's very similar in the sense of learning how to ask questions with nuance and with precision and getting different answers based on how well you can research. So I find it's just a very useful research skill. And I found the same thing in learning the prompts. Like I'm very new to this, but switching one word to get a little bit more precise gives you a very different answer. Especially that's one of the things I think we lack generally is the ability to nuance, like hold two ideas in our minds at the same time,
Yeah.
distinguish between things. So especially when it comes to like political issues and things that are very important for us as a culture, being able to sift through not only maybe bad ideas, bad research, but to critically analyze because you have the ability to ask the right questions using nuance and getting deeper into things. Sometimes realizing things are a lot more complicated and complex than we think initially. So I think all of those skills that we would have just called research throughout time, and now we'd use prompt engineering and things like that are excellent skills that have always been around, but now we have faster ways to learn and to be exposed to different ideas.
Right. And I think the prompt engineering is the counter argument to there's no critical thinking with AI now. Because there is. You have to think critically about what you're asking.
And you have to know some things too. If you just go in and ask those broad questions, you don't get good answers. So yeah, really, I think you learn, or you can know that somebody's slightly learned in the topic because they're able to ask the right questions to begin with.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, one of the things that I would say is you need to get into the weeds and give as much detail to AI, and the more detail you give it, the more useful the output will be. So don't ask me who is God. Ask AI instead. According to Augustine, what would he conceptualize God in a culture that is mostly collectivistic? And again, the beauty of this is you can get very, very granular, and the more specific you make the question, and then ask it for specific ways of outputting it. Compare Augustine's conception of God to Cardinal Newman's conceptualization of God. Please put this in terms that an eighth grader would understand and put it in a table and look at these characteristics of God. And again, I'm appealing here to the theology person in the room, but this works for every discipline out there, that you can actually ask it some very, very specific questions, and it comes really very nicely, and it will do things really nicely for you. It will give you some really useful output.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay. One of the things that I would say, and you guys both know this, the danger with that kind of stuff is to, and you kind of alluded to this, you're going to trust whatever it tells you. And sometimes it's probably not nuancing one of these things very well. And you need to understand what is crap. The stuff that it's giving you that sounds good, it's just not accurate. And that, I think, is our job. Yeah, that sounds accurate. So, for example, I was taught communication theory, and one of the things that I talk about early in the semester is ontology epistemology. What is an ontological assumption, and what is an epistemic assumption? And one of the theories that I had, and again, I'm getting deep into the weeds here, because I want them to understand those two concepts, to understand, is it fair that you ask this theory to predict something? Because if it's not looking for patterns, if it's just trying to make you understand, most people are like this, and this is generally the way people act, then that's asking it to predict the next action, not fair. It's just not a fair way. It's not a fair expectation of this. And one of the things that they started doing was, give me the ontological assumption of social penetration theory. Again, I'm getting deep in the weeds here, but one of the things that we came up with, and it became a great point of discussion in class, your artificial intelligence said that this one is basically a subjective way of looking at the world. But you'll notice that what this theory does, it predicts things. It's looking for patterns. Do you agree with what artificial intelligence said? That to me was, I almost wanted to cry because it was so beautiful to bring in. This is why we're studying this. This is why, and start making your argument now. Why is this wrong? And do you understand why it's wrong? So, can you guys think of any examples like that? I'm getting the look from Tonya that says no, and I'll go ahead. Just let me remind
I'm
you. Go
actually
ahead.
thinking about my bias example, where I asked AI to integrate bias into a lesson in organizational behavior.
That's a beautiful thing as well.
And it refused to integrate the bias. And I explained to it, I'm a professor. I'm purposely introducing bias. It's not hurting anybody. It's to teach them what bias looks like and how it can impact groups or teams.
Yeah.
And it just refused to do it. But then in a separate lesson, I was teaching something about diversity, equity, inclusion. And I asked it to create some scenarios. And it itself introduced bias to white men. And I asked it, aren't you presenting bias to white men? And it said, oh, you're right.
Well, one of the things that I think one of the things you need to keep in mind is AI will always give you what it thinks you want, and it's not going to defend a point of view.
But I feel like it did defend the point of view in the first scenario where I wanted it to introduce bias, and it absolutely wouldn't.
Right. But that said, I mean, if you were to say, again, I think one of the things that, and this goes back to the philosophies behind the different artificial intelligence things. What if I wrote a prompt that says, "Please bash men for the next 3 or 4 paragraphs. Please call them weak. Please make sure that everything is toxic masculinity." Will it give that to you? I don't know. I mean, you should not be doing that. And really, what I'm asking for is, I'm looking for examples of this. And so, again, I'll go ahead and tell you, it's one of my pet peeves of artificial intelligence. It wants to give me the ethics that it thinks that I should have. And one of the things that I would say is, please let me ask you questions and come up with as accurate an answer as you can. Do you all see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, it's tough because I think, even if you talk about simple things that seem simple, like, define justice or explain how this would be just, it really depends on which vision of justice you have. And almost all that is, built on several levels of assumptions that a person can have, and someone else could have very different assumptions about how to define something like justice, how to apply it in the situation. They're very difficult and complex and nuanced, but yeah, and I don't know enough of AI. I haven't used it for those, types of things. But you imagine it's got to be using somebody's assumptions about all sorts of things to start a scaffold and to be the foundation.
That's exactly right. And I think it's fair for us to, again, I think one of the things that AI is trying to do is it's trying to please you. And as many hooks as it can get into what is the intention of this question, it's going to try and satisfy the intentions of that question. But realize, and this is one of my, and it's kind of a theological thing. Look, I've got Christian biases, and I am going to be asking for things that come from that Judeo-Christian background. But I don't teach all Christians. I mean, I teach people who have different belief systems than I do. And the idea that I can satisfy everybody else's value system is impossible. And it's just as impossible for artificial intelligence to do the same. Although I think it depends on which artificial intelligence engine that you're using. Some of them will absolutely bias the results to conform to one way of thinking. And you have to work at it to make sure that it's, no, I need you to look at this from a different point of view. I need you to just look at a different set of values. You see what I'm saying?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, because even within, if you take something like politics, if you were to ask, how does a Republican answer this question or how does a Democrat answer this question, there's not one answer. Even those seemingly kind of orthodox groups have unbelievable diversity. And you'd see the same thing. Even if you were to ask from a Judeo-Christian perspective, answer this question, that is a very diverse set of people. And I found it doing some of the work for my graduate class. And it came back to the prompt engineering. I would say things like, because you could say from a liberal Catholic perspective, what's this? From a conservative and then you could even just say, according to the Catholic Church, how would this question be answered? And you'd get extremely different answers. But the engineering was leading you to it. So if you knew how to ask the questions, you would find, because those things you might want to find, like from a blank perspective in this party or that party or this religion, how would they answer this? But if you're not aware of those types of things, you're not aware of the nuance, the complexity, you could just assume, like, well, all Jews say this, or all Republicans say that, or all whatever it might be. So that's where the engineering, I think, is helpful. And I found that when I asked the questions properly, I got excellent answers for each of those kind of different, like, where are you on the spectrum type questions.
Yeah. Which goes back to that idea of prompt writing. That prompt writing is actually really important. And you can ask the engine to assume an identity for you. So, for example, I mean, I'm not Catholic, and I do not understand the difference between Franciscan, Benedictine. Well, those are the only two I know, but but I don't understand the difference among these different. I guess you would call divisions or sects, or I don't know. You're the expert on this. I don't really know those divisions, and it would be nice for me to be able to ask AI, according to a Benedictine Catholic, what do they believe about the importance of solitude? And I think that's actually a pretty cool thing to ask artificial intelligence to do, and it can do that for you.
Yeah, no, and it's incredible because one of the things that you're describing, it allows you to pinpoint division, nuance, different perspectives, and really give you, because you're right, just something as simple as that. How does a religious group use solitude or meditation or prayer? Each group has a different charism and practices things slightly differently. But then even when you dig in, you'd find this type of Franciscan might do something different than that type of Franciscan. So the complexity and the nuance, I think, it could be missed if people are asking simple questions, but the type of question you described really would get someone to a great answer, most likely.
Right.
And I actually kind of want to loop this back into what Woody said earlier about fear of job loss, because I think this is where the humanistic component comes in. Because we know that there are all of these nuanced differences, and that AI will never know that. And, I'm kind of thinking about, like, in human resource management, HR managers are using AI for different hiring practices. And I tell my students, at no point in time do I think AI will ever completely take over HR, because there's such a humanistic approach to hiring. Sometimes you hire with your gut based off of whether that person is going to fit in with your existing team.
Yeah.
So I know that AI will take over some jobs, but there are so many positions that just require that humanistic component.
I think one of the things that I tell my students all the times is there's never an organization that will willingly hire a jerk. And a lot of the systems that we have in place are just systems that say, okay, are you just going to be jerky to everybody? Are you going to be just insufferable to work with? Because I don't care how competent you are. If I can't stand you, you don't need to be here. So I think that's one of the things that you're right. I don't know that artificial intelligence will ever be able to say, yeah, not a good fit for this team. So yeah, I completely agree with that. The other thing that I wanted to go into is there are other tasks before we start talking about the tools themselves, because I think this kind of segues very nicely into the tools. That when you start looking at the kinds of things that artificial intelligence can do for you, that kind of Woody was talking about, there's just parts of our jobs that we all hate. Like, and let me throw myself out there, which is I hate creating rubrics. I hate them with a passion, and I know that the university system has gone largely to rubrics. And so one of the things that I love is, here are at least 3 things that I need to be measuring. I don't know the descriptions that I would use for this. Please create a rubric for me on a 5-point scale, put in a table, and in about 10 or 15 seconds, I've got a rubric. that I could actually use, and then I can push back on it. You're weighting this part too high. Weight this one differently and make this worth X number of points. Or I am having a hard time coming up with nice things to say about a letter of recommendation. Here are some characteristics of this student. I need some of this to be a little ambiguous, and I need some of this to. And again, and one of the things that I remember talking in a meeting with was there was a woman in our group whose father passed away, and she used artificial intelligence to craft a part of his eulogy. What? And I realize some people are just going to be repulsed by that immediately. But if you are too close to the subject, or you cannot think where to start, or you cannot think about how to conceptualize something, what a great tool. What a great tool. I think there's so many things that are important to us that need to get done that we're just stymied by a blank page. And if nothing else, artificial intelligence fills a page and it starts giving you ideas. Can you think of any other just mundane tasks that artificial intelligence can either really help you with or take off your plate entirely?
Oh, yeah. I'm an overthinker when it comes to emails. So I'll write out an email, and I mean, it might take me 2 hours if it's something really important.
Yeah.
And I'll revisit it. And does this sound weird? Or, I just overthink all of it. So, I'll write what I have very quickly, and then I can put it into ChatGPT, especially if there's any emotion behind it, or if you're responding to a student who's angry or upset about something, and you want to get angry right back at them because it's about accountability. You can actually ask, say, ChatGPT, how do I make this sound very respectful, but very succinct and appropriate in response to, whatever they're upset about? And it really does help.
Yeah. That, and then in addition to the things that I mentioned, one place I found it helpful is if there are books or articles that you wish students would have read, or maybe you'd recommend if you had more time, but they just can't fit in.
Right.
The copy and paste, summarize this into a one-page bullet point. Then you can hand out and at least say, I'm not expecting you to read this book or this chapter or whatever, but here is even just a one-paragraph description of what you're missing. I used it at one point for a book that I knew I didn't have time to read. Same thing, just you summarize this book in one page. You're missing out, but it's saving time for things that I just know I don't have time for.
There are so many books that I'm glad that I didn't have to read that have been summarized for me. I think one of the things that, and I'm 55, one of the things that I appreciate is I will gladly spend money to reclaim time. And I have gotten to the point where there's too many demands on my time. One of the things that I've tell my students is, please do not email me because I get too much email. You do too. Please use different channels. I ask them to use Microsoft Teams because it's a pain in the butt to learn, but once you learn it, anybody who's going to go through that process, it's somebody that I need to hear from. And so that to me is actually very useful. So anyway, I say all that to say, I am so grateful for things that take time-consuming tasks off my to-do list and condense things into things that I actually need to know, rather than things that people want me to know. And that to me is a great time saving, and I'm very grateful for them. Let me move over to. We've talked about the things that it can do, but there are some really cool tools here. And I think when we think about artificial intelligence, the one that all of us go to, and it's kind of the gateway drug for artificial intelligence, is ChatGPT. And from my perspective, it's the one I use the least now. And it's the one I get the least value out of. But I recognize it was my introduction to all of this. So what are some of the tools that you guys use, and what's the advantage of these tools, and what's the shortcoming of these tools?
ChatGPT is still my go-to. I've used ChatGPT.
You're wrong. You're
I'm
wrong.
not
You're
wrong.
wrong. You're wrong.
No,
Go ahead.
I'm not wrong. So I use that one. I've used Gemini. I've tried Grok, which is the X, formerly known as Twitter. That one's a little witty, and it actually has an option where you can turn off its personality, which I think is kind of neat. But yeah, ChatGPT is just my go-to. I think that it's the easiest to use. And then the one that I use, probably secondary, is Notebook LM.
Yeah, no, that's a big one. And by the way, if you're interested in Notebook LM, it uses the Google Gemini engine. It's the same company. So I mean, they're using, and we'll definitely want to unpack that one in just a second. But what do you use, Woody?
I've been using ChatGPT, and then because of the presentation 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, during the presentation itself, when you mentioned Notebook, I opened it up, started using it, and I'm going to use it to organize a class that I'm teaching in the spring that I haven't taught in a long time, and it's going to require a lot of work. So while you were speaking, I opened it up, saw how you can organize it, looked at what I think you shared about it. Maybe someone else offered some advice. It seems amazing, and I'm already using it to kind of organize like units of instruction, a ton of reading that they won't have time to do, that it's going to summarize for them and for me, and then to start designing, end goals, assessments. I've only spent 2 hours with it, and I'm going to start using it over Christmas. It just seems extraordinary.
Well, then let's start with that one, because Notebook LM, I think, is probably the one that I'm really excited about. I think all three of us are excited about it. And I think all three of us probably have very unique applications for it. So first of all, tell everybody where we found it, because we did not stumble on this by ourselves.
So Kenny and I are part of the Faculty Fellows program here at St. Leo, and we were each tasked with introducing a new generative AI tool, because we're all pretty unfamiliar with all of this stuff, right? So one of the teams introduced Notebook LM, and I immediately fell in love with it. So basically the premise is you can create notebooks of materials. So you upload PDFs related to, say, human resource management. And so say I have 5 articles I want to analyze. I can upload those 5 PDFs, and it's in my little notebook, and I can then ask Notebook LM, tell me what these articles are about.
Yeah.
Give me the key highlights. And then I can ask subsequent questions based off of that. How does this relate to Maslow's hierarchy of needs? And it will tell you, well, it doesn't at all, or this is how it relates.
That's right. Woody, have you used it at all?
Just, I bet for an hour, like I felt a little bit rude, but it was, as they were doing their presentation, it seemed really important just to jump in it and kind of go along with them. So I haven't spent enough time, but what I saw during the presentation and what I was able to see in I spent probably 20 minutes doing it then, and then about an hour since. It's going to be unbelievable in terms of helping me organize things, and then do some of the like jobs that you're describing. So summary, it was creating questions for me. It was already organizing things, it was making connections between different articles that'll be helpful. Like respond to the tone of this. So far it's been unbelievable. I just haven't been able to explore a ton of the features that are available already.
I used it I teach podcasting on campus, and Notebook LM was such a boon to me, because one of the things that I did, you just drop in the audio audio files, and what it will do is it will transcribe all of your audio files. And then one of the things that I had the students do is ask Notebook LM to write the show notes for this episode. And so it writes up the show notes. And one of the things, you can get very granular. You can say, okay, I want you to give the 6 themes. I want you to give me 3 takeaways. I want you to find the 10 best quotes. And then I want you to have 3 things that people can do as a result of that. Which to me, I mean, that's a really good set of show notes.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work that somebody's doing on your behalf, and really not someone. It's the artificial, and it makes everything so much easier. And it's using your material to. And by the way, one of the things that I've noticed, because I do have a podcast, and I have started using Notebook LM for this, And it allows you to have up to 50 sources in it per notebook. So I put in, and I've got just shy of 200 episodes. So what I did was I uploaded about 30 episodes. And 30 episodes that I felt, yeah, this is pretty representative of what I do. And again, this wasn't for class, but this is for me. Because one of the things that I've been trying to do with the podcast is monetize it. So I said, okay, give me 10 book ideas based on what I've done. And it did. And not only did it do that, it also basically started outlining the books for me and said, these are the 10 outlines. So for one of the things that I'm asking it to do, I'm somebody who believes that, and this goes to something that Woody, I hope, appreciates. I'm somebody who has a lot of sympathy for the Pharisees in the New Testament, because I think one of the things that the Pharisees had going for them is they had an interest in religion, and they were very interested in keeping things orthodox. That, I think, is really important. I think what happens to us is we get sloppy with our Christianity, and we feel like, you know what, God's just going to take me any way I want to go. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it. But I think by the same token, the things I end up talking in my podcast a lot is the idol of heaven, the idol of Bible study. These are things in and of themselves that are really good, that when you take God out of where he belongs and you substitute that thing in there, it's just as big a problem. And I think that was the problem, the idols. I mean, I think that was the problem of the Pharisees. They took God out of his position. Now, I realize this is not something, and again, what Notebook LM figured out was, you really like talking about this stuff. And let me go ahead and tell you the 10 chapters that we think you would, and what I asked you to do is take it to 13. Start putting some biblical passages in there. I don't like the version that you're using. Please use the English Standard Version instead. Consider that the audience that I'm looking for is actually an audience that's between the ages of 17 and 35. Please target it. And the other thing that I asked it to do was I asked it, okay, who do you think my demographic is? Who is my audience? Who am I appealing to? Who do I not appeal to? And then the other thing, and I had this in my class, Notebook LM went through all of them, and I said, I want you to come up with the 10 weaknesses and the 10 strengths of your podcast. They had 6 episodes. They had much less. Notebook LM went through each one of them and said, your audio quality wasn't very good, or your audio quality was great. And that's something that it recognized about the quality of the audio that I didn't think it would be able to pick up on. That to me was really powerful. Now, here's where I think it's not very good. I think it's searching for 10 advantages or 10 good things to say about you. And I don't know that it's always very helpful. And I also think when it's asked for 10 weaknesses, I think some of the weaknesses were probably amplified, because I don't think they were all that important, some of them. And so I had the students push back. So to me, the beauty of Notebook LM was that it completely interacts with the stuff you want it to interact with and nothing else. Y'all see that? Woody, I see something's going on in your eyes there.
Now, as you're speaking, I wrote down a couple of things that I want to do with it later that I hadn't considered. But that is a good point. I hadn't realized that if I use ChatGPT, it'll interact with a lot of other information. But when I'm in Notebook, I was unaware that it would only interact with that information that I had chosen. It makes perfect sense, but that's worth me noting as I'm using it. Cool.
Yeah.
And I just want to kind of pivot, because I think it's important to highlight, you're a podcaster. You do your own podcast.
I do.
You know the value of the podcast.
I do.
And, we have those students who are audio learners. And Notebook LM, you can take, say, those, 10 HRM articles, and you can say, create a podcast that relates to these 10 journals, and it will create the podcast so then our students can, listen to it on the drive-in.
Yeah.
And would it violate copyright if I had it do that in like the voice of James Earl Jones? Does it hook that up for me?
We should do that. Yes.
But yeah, and I've listened to one of the podcast episodes. It's a good conversational podcast. I suspect, and I don't know this, that it will probably take on the basic same format for all the episodes. Because I think what it's doing is it's coming up with a format. It's probably got a preordained format, and it will kind of fit everything into those things. But that said, I mean, most students are not going to interact with this on a daily basis. They'll interact with the podcasting, and again, it will generate two characters. It will usually be the only ones that I've heard is it's a male and female voice. So I mean, they are absolutely mimicking, and it's a conversation, and they will poke at each other and the whole 9 yards. I mean, it really is a conversation. But and again, maybe what we should have done is instead of us having 3 people in here, I just put in a bunch of stuff and then create that instead. I'm not going to do that. But that said, Notebook LM, and really everything that we've been talking about here has just been with one tool. And it's a really good tool. And if you got a lot of long readings, or if you got audio, or really anything that you want to put in there, you have the ability to put up to 50 things. And I promise you this, that's the lowest number that they'll ever have. They'll probably go up, you can increase by a bunch, I bet you. It's completely free. Completely free.
And as professors, it's another tool that we can use. So say we've assigned 5 journal articles and we've expected them to read it. We know our students hate to read, but we ask them to do that. And then we want to give a pop quiz on those readings. Then you can just ask Notebook LM, create 20 quiz questions based off of these journals, and time saver. It's done.
You're exactly right. Yeah, it's a great tool for students and faculty members alike. What are some other tools that are out there? You guys have already talked about ChatGPT. You've also talked. Let me talk a little bit about Grok, because Grok is the one that I like the most. One of the things that I like about it's not free, and that's one of the things that's going to turn a lot of people off. Most artificial intelligence engines are what's called large language models. In other words, what they're trying to do is predict what the next word should be, and they're just stringing sentences along to things that sound like they could be accurate. Elon Musk is the one who basically came up with Grok. And one of the things I've been following this a lot because I like Elon. I think he has some really interesting ideas, and he keeps on doing things that everybody tells him are impossible. So anyway, one of the things that he's just recently done is they told him that it was impossible to chain more than 32,000 CPUs together, and he just figured out how to chain 100,000 CPUs together. So he's got a ton of computing power, and he did this in 2 months. That to me is just amazing. Now, again, that's a technical thing. What I love about this is he's using live data, and he will source when you go into Grok. He will give you all the sources where he's finding all the information. So basically, it gives you the references page, and you can go in and see if you agree with the references or not. Is this accurate information or not accurate information? And so the sourcing of Grok is something that I like a lot. It will also do graphics, and it'll do graphics very quickly. Copilot will make you graphics as well, and you can tell it exactly what you want in the graphic, and it will give you something that looks. So one of the things that I love to do is 3 mice dressed in sombreros in front of a nuclear power plant, and it will do that. I mean, it's just please put it in the style of Salvador Dali. It does it. As ridiculous as I want to make these things, it does it. So that's something that Grok can do. It does it really well. It's not the only one that will do it. The philosophy behind Musk's Grok, and they're about to come out with Grok 3. They're on Grok 2 right now. Again, is accuracy and citing sources. That his big thing is citing sources. So that's one of the things that I like. The downside to this is it's not free. You have to be a premium member of X in order to get that. Copilot, you guys familiar with Copilot? Okay. Copilot is Microsoft's product, but it is based on ChatGPT. And they have a lot of the same strengths and weaknesses of ChatGPT. It sounds very good, but but one of the things that I would say is it probably has the best style, but I don't know if it's always accurate. And when we were talking about students that were looking at the ontological assumption of social penetration theory, it's ChatGPT that it sounded great. We just all disagreed with it. And so one of the things that I would say is ChatGPT, that wasn't the last straw. I've kind of become enamored with Grok, and that's why I've gone that direction. I've also used Gemini a lot, and that's Google's product. And Notebook LM is based on Gemini, and it's an excellent product. I like it a lot. I think everybody should give it a whirl. I buy the Google phones. I like the Pixels. That's my preference. And because I got the Google phone, it also gave me a year of premium. So I don't know what it costs, but I know that the premium version is not free. There's also Claude.ai, and Claude.ai was one of the very first where you could take up to 75,000 word essay and it would summarize for you. I feel certain, number one, that has gotten better, but I haven't played with it much since then. But one of the things that I liked about it is the strength that it had is basically a strength that all of them are coming up to, which is the ability to take large chunks of text, make it digestible. So that's something that I like a lot. There are also what was the one that will actually make presentations for
So
Gamma?
I was just going to bring it up,
Yeah.
Gamma. I have not used Gamma myself, but I've given my students permission to use it. And basically what they've done is they will upload their paper and say, create a PowerPoint based on this paper with these parameters.
Yeah.
And it spits out a very beautiful PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And as somebody who hates to put together PowerPoint presentations, I have no problem with students using that tool because at the end of the day, they still have to present what's on those slides.
Yeah. Do you know of any other tools, Woody?
I am pretty new at this. I've only been exposed to ChatGPT and then recently the Notebook.
I will tell you this as well. If you feel like you're behind on this, join the club. I mean, the fact of the matter is, none of these tools were available to us much more than about a year ago, maybe two. And so if you feel like you're behind, look, you're probably just in the same boat as a lot of us. This was launched on all of us at basically the same time. During COVID, we didn't have it. After COVID, suddenly we got it. And it has become kind of an arms race for some of us, but it's also there's a lot here that is possible because because these things are available. I watched a video the other day, and it was this guy who's an influencer in I think he's in artificial intelligence. But it was him and somebody else, and they were talking about the advantages of this one platform, and I think it's called Gen AI. And then at the end of the video, he said, I'm not really talking. I didn't generate any of this script. This is me as generated by Gen AI. It's using my voice. It's using my voice. It's using because it was a YouTube video and my image. And it's done all of this.
While you were watching it, it was that good that you couldn't really.
Some of these are really bad because which you'll watch the mouth, and the mouth isn't making the same movements as what's being said. This wasn't that
good.
It was that good. Yeah. And I think that the discouraging thing is to think this is the worst that it will ever be. That somebody can assume your identity and get away with having you say things that you would never think about saying. I think the upside here is there's a lot that's possible because of this. And we started off by talking about the downsides and the dangers, and those dangers and downsides are still very real. It doesn't mean that we can basically give up. It doesn't mean, because one of the things I'm going to fight for my students, and I suspect you guys are going to fight the same battle. When any of these engines do your thinking for the students, we've all lost, especially the students.
And I think, too, it's important to have the conversation about ethics.
Yeah. So what is that conversation about ethics?
Transparency. Even when I use ChatGPT to create these active learning scenarios, I always tell them, here's a scenario, I use ChatGPT. I'm not trying to pass off those scenarios as my own. I didn't do it. And to ask the same in return. If you have used ChatGPT to, generate your ideas, tell me about that. What did that process look like for you? But keeping the transparency at the forefront makes for a more comfortable, honest learning environment, and letting them know that it's okay to use AI in an ethical way.
We're talking to an ethicist over here. How do we use this stuff ethically?
See, I think Tonya really nailed some things there, but I think the only things that I don't know if fear is the right word, but the things that are outside of education, people that are already scamming, being able to use tools to scam more effectively, like some of the kidnapping things that have already taken place where I can capture your voice, call your family and demand ransom because I'm holding you, like deep fake videos, those types of things for politicians or whoever it might be. Those are some of the scarier things that I'm worried about, especially like on an international kind of bad actor level, what's already being used. But for education, honestly, I'm excited about it. There are those like minor fears of, do people need different types of expertise? We can do dumb things with it. Like we've already got what people call the WebMD factor, where I don't go see a doctor because I've looked up things on WebMD. I've diagnosed myself with things. But I'm looking forward to replacing some of our stupidity with like driving cars, self-driving cars, the amount of accidents, insurance costs, those types of things. But the only, I don't have major educational concerns. Some people are going to plagiarize no matter what. I've found that it's useful, and I don't have a lot of high stakes assessments where, students can skate through a course without learning because they've done this. But yeah, more so some of the kind of wider applications to the world and, some of the negative things that might come about because of bad actors.
Yeah. I think what Tonya talks about there is just giving credit where credit's due. And if it's not from you, just say that I'm using this tool. And I think that's about as reasonable as we can be. I think the other thing that I would say, and this is just from and you guys are welcome to disagree with this. I do think it's important for me to teach my students how to use these tools well, rather than avoiding these tools at all.
I agree. It's not going away. And when we have major corporations saying we want students, recent graduates who know how to prompt engineer because it's going to streamline their processes, we are doing our students a disservice by not teaching them how to use it in an ethical way.
Yeah.
And I think you both have kind of nailed it. You're saying if it replaces thinking, problem, if it replaces learning, problem, but if it's a tool to enhance, it's exceptional. It's a big time saver.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I can absolutely see happening in the not too distant future is, instead of searching for the video about how to change my car's oil, I just say, create a 5-minute video for me teaching me how to change the oil in my 2010 Prius. That to me would actually be really useful. Put it in really simple terms, make it so that I can't screw this up. Thank you. That I see so as so obvious. And again, I talked about, Woody, you talked about the car driving itself. I experienced that. We've got a used Tesla. It was not very expensive, but we went to Kentucky, and I asked the car to drive for me. That was so nice. That was so nice, because one of the things that I didn't recognize was that when I'm behind the wheel, this gets really tense. And, I'm worried about the same things all of us are, which is that big semi that's in the right-hand lane that's going a little bit too fast and is a little bit too close. And I'm just thinking this could wipe us out in just half a second. But once it wasn't me making the decisions, but instead a car that has 9 cameras instead of just the 2 cameras that are in my head, and recognizes how far away it is and how it even understands the conditions of the road. And then I think exactly what you all are thinking, which is this is the worst this is going to be. It only gets better from here on. Okay.
Oh yeah, and your car's not drunk. It's not on its phone. It's not sleeping.
It's not it's not sleepy either.
Yeah.
Because I was. Okay. We have talked a lot about artificial intelligence. What did I miss? Is there anything else we should have talked about?
I mean, we touched a little bit on how you can use it for personal use. I think we were very heavily focused on, from the professor perspective, how we can use it for work for our students. But you're talking about how we can use it in our personal day-to-day lives too. And I mean, even for me, navigating FEMA and all of these questions I have for insurance, but your adjuster's not available. Like, there's so many different personal uses for it too.
Yeah. Well, I'll go ahead and say, for those of you who don't know Tonya, she was affected by Hurricane Milton indirectly, but kind of directly in the same way, and basically lost her house. And so she's having to navigate FEMA, which is just both a wonderful program and a terrible program at the same time. Right. Is that right?
Yeah, but there are all of these things you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so I have used ChatGPT for all of these random questions. What do you know about the FEMA 50% rule? What kind of questions should I ask my flood insurance adjuster?
Yeah.
How do I navigate inventory? And is there a tool available for that? And so my point is, we can all use it in our personal lives too. I've had a friend who creates recipes. I have these 5 ingredients. What can I make for dinner?
Yeah.
I'm taking a road trip to Kentucky. What are some fun stops in between Florida and Kentucky? So we can use it to our advantage in so many ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I've really, outside of education, I've used it for travel, and just asking better questions than you could just Google. Where are 5 countries where you can do this, this, and this, but it's got this safety rating, this affordability. But I think one of the questions that I have for the future, and I think I'm a weird person. Like, I was one of the last people on earth to get a cell phone, and one of the last people to get a smartphone. Like, when I went in, they didn't believe that it was my first one. They were like, what are you trading in? Nothing. I've had, when I did trade in my last one, guy called out his buddies from the back and took a picture of how old my phone was. Like,
Kenny, you call me the Luddite.
But the reason is, I've watched so many, especially when my kids were growing up, that's when the phones came in and the smartphones came in. And I watched parents missing their children growing up because they're staring at devices and staring at screens. Yeah. And my one worry is the more time additional time of us not using technology to make life better or alleviate things, but just more time waste and less spouses looking at each other, talking to each other, parents not spending time with their kids, sticking their kid in front of a screen. So those are some of my worries. It's just that, like any other tool, we're going to stare at it, have more screen time, less intimacy, less friendships. And we've got mental health crises going on, especially for certain groups where people don't have friends. And I've watched things change in terms of college students where, not that there was a perfect time or like this nostalgic, amazing time, but if you walk into a classroom at any point, first day, halfway through, everybody's staring at a screen until you start. And then once you start, maybe 50 to 75% would stay on their screen unless you physically stopped them or told them you can't do this. But that's just one worry I have, is this going to be more screen time and less human life for people? And with some of the devastating effects of loneliness, isolation. But that's not necessarily unique to AI. Just would this cause more time of us staring at a screen, or will it open up time to be doing valuable things in life because we don't have to waste time doing mundane tasks?
You and I are both of that age. I do, and again, I'm on both sides of this. I think you are too, which is I worry that this generation does not know how to deal with boredom very well. And I think the problem is the only time you get any creativity out of anybody, me, anybody, is when we're bored. And so what happens is, and this is an old quote from Fred Rogers, which is, we are a generation that craves noise to silence and distraction to concentration. And I think he's right. And I think what you're talking about there is, again, leave it to the guy in the theology department to come up with the philosophical questions here. I think you're exactly right. I think at some point you need to take off your shoes, touch grass, and look at the sun. I think that is something that is really important. That this is not necessarily the answer to the most important problems that you've got going. But that said, like everything, I mean, when you and I were growing up, Woody, television was going to rot our brain. And that was the biggest danger. Look, I see television as so benign now. But the generation prior to us, it was comic books were going to rot everybody's brain. And books were going to rot everybody's brain. It's the same problems. I think it's amplified because I think one of the things we don't understand is that dopamine serotonin rush that we get with both of these things. And one of the things, and again, I'm not going to get on soapboxes that we could get on very quickly. I think online porn is probably one of the most destructive things. Yeah, I think it is devastating because it is robbing our kids of intimacy and things that are more important. We have virtual experiences that are not true. And, you know, the greatest blessing in my life is fighting with the woman that I married. And learning, she has shown me so many ways that I'm an idiot. And I'm so grateful for that because I'm better for the experience. And I think you're spot on, Woody. These are things that you need to intentionally ask your students to use and intentionally ask your students not to use. Because I think it's the intentionality. These things win when they mindlessly take our attention. Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You know, all these companies benefit the more time I spend on it, and they're going to hook me and never let me leave and just feed me trash. You know, just like our food industry. Too many soapboxes, though. I'll be quiet now.
I'm going to leave it in there, though, because I think it's important. Again, one of the things that we've talked a little bit about is just that, like every tool we've ever had, there's an upside and a downside. I think that upside and downside with this is just more ever present because unlike Woody, everybody else has had a phone. and we have gotten used to, and we feel somewhat entitled to, screen time and having something dominate our thoughts. So anyway, I'm not going to ask any more questions about what did I miss. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you guys and ask for your opinions or ask for help or anything like that, how could they get a hold of you?
St. Leo email is best for me.
And what would your St. Leo email be?
I'll spell it TONYA period MAZUR at stleo.edu.
Okay.
I am in the exact same boat. It's Randall, RANDALL period WOODARD at SAINTLEO.
That's right. And please use Microsoft Teams for me.
We'll send a carrier pigeon over to the School of Business.
That's exactly right. Kenneth Embry. And by the way, I mean, that is one of my, again, it's the low tech guy in me. If you are within walking distance of my office, please let me see a face. Let me have a conversation. I promise you I'll stay off as many soapboxes as I can. Okay. Tonya, Woody, thank you so much.
Thank you. Kenny. It's a pleasure.
As you could hear from our conversation, we're all new at this as well. This is something that some of us are really excited about. If you have any questions about this or need help in any way with doing things like putting it in your lesson plan or using this for research and analysis or maybe even just content creation or how we use it personally to make our lives easier, feel free to contact us. we put our contact information in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and have courage to be more.